The fortress of Veyrath Hollow rose above the surrounding valleys like a monument carved from shadow and stone. Hundreds of golden lanterns illuminated its towering walls as noble carriages rolled through the gates one after another. Inside, music echoed beneath vaulted ceilings, while aristocrats from distant territories gathered to celebrate the 7th-month anniversary of Duchess Aurelius Danemore and Duke Valar Ashwind. To every guest in attendance, theirs appeared to be a marriage blessed by fortune. They were admired, respected, and envied throughout the realm. Yet, on this particular evening, an uneasiness lingered in Aurelius' heart that she could not explain. Standing before a silver-framed mirror in her private chamber, the Duchess adjusted the sapphire clasp fastened at the collar of her emerald gown. Her raven-black hair flowed elegantly down her back, and her silver-gray eyes reflected both intelligence and grace. For months she had embraced her role as Valar's wife, believing she had found a partner she could trust. But lately something had changed. Valar had become distant. Conversations ended abruptly when she entered rooms. Important meetings took place behind closed doors. None of it made sense, yet her instincts warned her that something was wrong. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. "Your Grace," her attendant Marielle said from outside the door. "The guests have arrived." Aurelius smiled politely. "Thank you. I'll be down shortly." When the door closed again, she took a deep breath and pushed her concerns aside. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Hours later, the grand hall sparkled with candlelight and crystal chandeliers. Musicians played elegant melodies while nobles mingled beneath banners bearing the crests of powerful families. Aurelius moved gracefully through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries and welcoming guests. Throughout the evening, however, she found herself searching for Valar. Eventually, she spotted him near the western gallery speaking quietly with Lord Cirion Velmire, his oldest friend and most trusted advisor. The two men appeared deeply engaged in conversation. When Valar noticed her looking in his direction, he immediately smiled and raised his glass. The gesture seemed warm, yet something about it felt rehearsed. For reasons she could not explain, the smile unsettled her. As the celebration continued, Aurelius excused herself from the ballroom. The noise had become overwhelming, and she welcomed the opportunity to spend a few moments alone. She wandered through the northern corridors of the fortress, where moonlight streamed through tall windows and painted silver patterns across the stone floor. The silence calmed her. Then she heard voices, two men speaking behind a partially opened ironwood door. Her footsteps slowed. The voices were familiar. Valar and Cirion. Aurelius had no intention of listening to a private conversation. She would have continued walking if she had not suddenly heard her own name. She stopped immediately. "How much longer can this continue?" Cirion asked. Pause followed. Then Valar answered. "Not much longer." A strange chill traveled through her body. "I never thought you could maintain the act this long," Cirion said. "Act?" Aurelius frowned. Inside the chamber, Valar laughed softly. "I had little choice." The Duchess moved closer despite herself. "Did you ever intend for the marriage to become real?" Cirion asked. Several seconds passed before Valar finally responded. "No." The word struck her like a blade. Her heart pounded. Her breath caught in her throat. "She still believes you married her because you loved her," Cirion continued. Valar laughed again. This time there was no warmth in the sound. "I married her because I needed House Danemore's holdings." Aurelius felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Her family's estates, their mines, their wealth, everything she had inherited, everything she had brought into the marriage. That was why he pursued her. Not because he loved her, not because he respected her, only because he wanted what belonged to her family. The betrayal was almost impossible to comprehend. Yet the worst revelation was still to come. "What happens when the final transfer is complete?" Cirion asked. Valar's answer came without hesitation. "Then Aurelius becomes irrelevant." The word echoed in her mind. Irrelevant. Not a wife. Not a partner. Not even a person. Simply a tool that had served its purpose. A means to an end. Cirion lowered his voice. "And nobody will suspect anything?" "They won't," Valor replied confidently. The documents are already prepared. By winter, everything important will belong to me. Documents, transfers, secret plans. Aurelius leaned closer to hear more. Suddenly, the sapphire bracelet around her wrist brushed against the stone wall. Click. The tiny sound echoed through the corridor. Instantly, the conversation stopped. Silence filled the chamber. Then Syrian spoke. Did you hear that? Footsteps approached the door. Fast. Aurelius turned and walked away as quickly as she could without running. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Behind her, the ironwood door opened. Voices searched the corridor. By the time she reached her chambers, her hands were trembling. She locked the door and stared at her reflection. The trusting wife who had entered the celebration no longer existed. Slowly, she crossed the room and opened a hidden compartment inside her desk. From within, she removed a black leather ledger filled with secrets, debts, scandals, and information powerful enough to destroy entire noble houses. A faint smile appeared on her lips. Valor Ashwin believed he was playing the perfect game. What he did not know was that his Duchess had just learned the truth. And before winter arrived, she intended to make him regret every lie he had ever told. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Sandy Lovetails loves hearing from viewers around the world, and your location might be featured in an upcoming shout-out. Aurelius did not sleep. Long after the last lantern in Veyrath Hollow had gone dark, she remained seated beside her desk, the black leather ledger open before her. The pain of Valor's betrayal still lingered, but she refused to let heartbreak cloud her judgment. Tears would accomplish nothing. What she needed now was patience. By the time dawn arrived, the wounded wife had vanished. In her place sat a strategist preparing for war. The following morning, she entered the dining chamber precisely on time. Valor was already seated, reviewing documents while sipping tea. When he saw her, he offered the same charming smile that had once made her feel special. Now she recognized it as nothing more than another carefully crafted lie. You seem tired, he said. Did you rest well? Aurelius returned a pleasant smile. Very well, thank you. She watched him closely as he resumed reading his papers. Not once did he suspect she had overheard his conversation with Syrian. That ignorance would become his greatest weakness. Over the next several days, Aurelius performed her role flawlessly. She accompanied Valor during public appearances, hosted visiting nobles, attended council gatherings, and behaved exactly as a devoted duchess should. To anyone observing them, their marriage appeared stronger than ever. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, she quietly began her investigation. Her first destination was the Fortress Archive, a vast collection of records hidden beneath the eastern wing of Veyrath Hollow. The archive contained decades of financial transactions, legal agreements, property deeds, and correspondence. If Valor had been transferring Danemore assets without her knowledge, evidence would be hidden somewhere among those records. For 3 days she searched. Most documents appeared ordinary. Then she found the first inconsistency. Several contracts authorizing transfers of Danemore mining revenues carried signatures that looked remarkably similar to her own. Yet she had never signed them. The handwriting was convincing, but not perfect. Whoever forged the documents had copied her signature carefully, yet certain strokes were slightly different. Aurelius felt anger rising inside her. Valor had not merely deceived her. He had committed fraud in her name. She copied every suspicious document and stored them inside her private chamber. On the 4th day, another breakthrough arrived unexpectedly. While reviewing ledgers inside the fortress library, she was approached by Orwin, the elderly keeper of records. The old man's weathered face carried an expression of concern. After ensuring no one was nearby, he quietly placed a sealed folder on the table. Your Grace, he whispered. I believe these belong in your hands. Aurelius opened the folder carefully. Inside were copies of private letters exchanged between Valor and several merchants. As she read, her heartbeat quickened. The correspondence revealed detailed plans to sell valuable Danemore properties immediately after the final transfer of ownership. Valor intended to strip her family's legacy apart piece by piece before abandoning her completely. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked softly. Orwin hesitated. "Because your father once saved my family from ruin. I have never forgotten his kindness." For a moment, genuine gratitude softened her expression. "Thank you, Orwin. You may have saved House Danemore." That evening, she added the letters to her growing collection of evidence. Yet despite everything she had uncovered, one problem remained. Documents alone might not be enough. Valor possessed influence. He had powerful allies. If she accused him privately, he could deny everything and manipulate the situation in his favor. She needed a public revelation. She needed witnesses. Fortunately, Valor soon presented her with the perfect opportunity. Several days later, he announced plans for a grand gathering at Veyrath Hollow. Influential merchants, noble families, and regional leaders would attend. Officially, the event would celebrate a major economic alliance. Unofficially, Aurelius suspected it marked the final stage of his scheme. "It's an excellent idea," she told him warmly. "Everyone will admire your leadership." Valor smiled, pleased by her support. He never noticed the calculation behind her eyes. Invitations were sent throughout the region. Within days, confirmations arrived from nearly every powerful family nearby. As the date approached, Aurelius continued gathering evidence while carefully concealing her intentions. Every forged contract, every secret letter, every financial record. Piece by piece, she assembled the case that would destroy him. Finally, the evening arrived. Veyrath Hollow glittered with candlelight. Nobles filled the grand hall. Merchants discussed trade opportunities while musicians played elegant melodies. Valor moved confidently through the crowd, greeting guests and accepting congratulations. He looked every bit the successful duke. Aurelius watched from across the room. Hidden beneath her emerald gown rested copies of every document she had collected. Tonight, the trap would close. Valor believed this gathering would secure his victory and place the Danemore fortune permanently within his grasp. He could not have been more mistaken. Before the night ended, every lie would be exposed. Every ally would learn the truth. And the man who believed he had outsmarted his Duchess would discover that he had been walking directly into her trap from the very beginning. Before we continue to the dramatic conclusion, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Sandy Lovetails loves seeing viewers from every corner of the world, and your location may be featured in our next community shout-out. The grand hall of Veyrath Hollow glittered beneath hundreds of crystal chandeliers as nobles, merchants, and powerful families gathered for what Duke Valor Ashwin believed would be the most important evening of his life. Every table was filled. Every influential guest he had spent months courting stood beneath the banners of the fortress. Servants moved through the crowd carrying silver trays, while musicians played elegant melodies that echoed through the enormous chamber. Valor stood at the center of it all, confident and proud. To him, victory was finally within reach. The forged documents were in place. The transfers were nearly complete. Soon the wealth of House Danemore would belong entirely to him. Across the hall, Duchess Aurelius Danemore watched quietly. Her emerald gown shimmered beneath the candlelight, and her expression remained calm. No one could see the evidence hidden beneath the folds of her dress. No one except Aurelius knew that tonight would end very differently from what Valor expected. As the evening progressed, guests raised their glasses and exchanged congratulations. Valor greeted merchants and nobles alike, accepting praise for his leadership. Several influential families had already agreed to future partnerships, believing they were investing in a trustworthy duke. Watching them made Aurelius realize just how many lives his deception would have affected if she had remained silent. Finally, a servant struck a ceremonial bell. The conversations faded. The musicians stopped playing. Every eye turned toward the raised platform at the front of the hall. Valor climbed the steps confidently and lifted a crystal goblet into the air. "Friends," he announced, his voice carrying throughout the chamber, "thank you for joining me this evening. Tonight we celebrate prosperity, partnership, and a bright future for our realm." Applause echoed through the hall. Valor smiled and continued speaking. He praised loyalty, He praised honor. He praised trust. Each word sounded more absurd than the last to Aurelius. Yet the audience listened attentively, unaware of the truth. As he neared the end of his speech, he held up a leather folder containing the final agreements he intended to sign before witnesses. "Tonight marks the beginning of a new chapter," he declared proudly. More applause followed. Then a calm voice interrupted the celebration. "A new chapter indeed." The room fell silent. Every head turned. Aurelius stepped forward from the crowd. Valor's confident smile faltered for the first time that evening. "My Duchess," he said cautiously, attempting to recover. "Would you care to address our guests?" Aurelius smiled. "I would." Curious murmurs spread throughout the hall as she ascended the platform beside him. Valor stepped aside, still believing he could control the situation. He had no idea what was coming. Aurelius faced the audience. "Many of you knew my father," she began. "Many of you conducted business with House Danemore long before I inherited its responsibilities. You know our family was built upon honesty, loyalty, and trust." Several guests nodded. Those values matter because trust is difficult to restore once it has been broken. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Valor's expression tightened. Aurelius reached beneath her gown and removed a thick collection of documents. Confused whispers rippled through the crowd. "Over the past week," she continued, "I discovered evidence of forged signatures, fraudulent transfers, and deliberate attempts to steal the assets of House Danemore." Shock spread across the hall. Valor stepped forward. "Aurelius, perhaps this matter should be discussed privately." She turned toward him. "Why? Were your schemes conducted privately because you feared the truth?" Laughter and murmurs erupted among the guests. Valor's face reddened. Aurelius handed copies of the forged contracts to several respected nobles seated in the front row. They examined the pages carefully. Moments later, one noble rose from his seat. "These signatures are false." Another studied a financial agreement. "The authorization dates don't match the official records." More voices joined in. The crowd grew restless. Valor attempted to object, but Aurelius was not finished. She produced Orwin's copied letters and began reading selected passages aloud. The words revealed plans to seize Danemore properties, sell family assets, and abandon the marriage once the transfers were complete. Gasps filled the hall. Merchants exchanged alarmed glances. Noble families whispered furiously among themselves. Every sentence destroyed another piece of Valor's carefully constructed reputation. His allies began moving away from him. Advisors who had stood beside him all evening suddenly avoided eye contact. Even Lord Syrian Velmeyer lowered his head in silence. Valor looked around desperately, searching for support. None came. One merchant stood and pointed directly at him. "You used marriage to commit fraud?" Another noble rose. "You forged legal documents?" A third shouted. "You deceived everyone in this hall." The accusations came from every direction. Valor's confidence collapsed. For the first time, fear appeared in his eyes. Aurelius stepped closer. Her voice remained calm, but every word struck with devastating force. "7 months ago, I believed I married a man worthy of respect. Instead, I married a man willing to betray anyone for power." Silence filled the hall. "You thought I would never learn the truth. You thought I would quietly surrender everything my family built. You were wrong." No defense remained. The evidence was overwhelming. Before the evening ended, several noble representatives announced formal investigations. Pending agreements were suspended immediately. Merchants withdrew their partnerships. Financial backers abandoned him one after another. Everything Valor had spent years building began collapsing in a single night. Aurelius watched without triumph or cruelty. She felt only relief. Justice had finally been served. As guests departed and discussions of investigations filled the hall, Valor remained standing alone beneath the chandeliers. The Duke, who had once commanded admiration, now stood surrounded by suspicion and disgrace. Without another word, Aurelius turned and walked toward the great doors of Varath Hollow. For the first time in months, she felt truly free. House Danemore was safe. Her family's legacy remained protected. And the man who had treated her as a tool had lost everything he valued most. If you enjoyed the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Sandy Love Tales loves hearing from viewers around the world, and your location may be featured in our next shout-out. Until our next tale of love, betrayal, and justice, thank you for being part of the Sandy Love Tales family.